Okay, can I make this wrap up quick and snappy? Probably not, but let's see what we can do. Let's see if we can try, because I'll be real, the battery on this, not that great, and I'd like to get this done now. Already, too much rambling. We're gonna start. 2 DNFs and I believe 10 books. It's like probably my best reading month of the year. I don't know if it's my best in terms of ratings or anything like that, but I generally liked my reading momentum. I had 2 projects, which made me excited. I think actually I posted 2 vlogs for my patrons, which has never happened in 1 month. I looked at this list and I'm like, oh, I read that this month. It felt like a very long reading month, but in a good way, in that so much goodness was in it. And I think part of that is I did have 2 DNFs. I was kind of rigorous on doing that. The first one was The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. It just was fine. Like, that's it. I DNF'd it because it felt like it would have been between a 3 and a 3.5 star, and I didn't really want it. My big, orange to red flag for me and my enjoyment was that the main character's inner thoughts did not match their outer actions in a way that I kept being pulled out of the narrative when I saw. I was just like, wait, why did you do that? I don't actually understand why you did that, but I'm also in your head, so that doesn't make sense, you know? So that was kind of like a orange to red flag for me, and also just the setting and the plot. Nothing was gripping me. And I read Leigh Bardugo to be transported, taken away, just go on a wild ride, and that wasn't happening. The next one is August Kito and the Mechas from Space. I read the first 70 pages of this, and it was, again, fine. If I finished it, would have probably been between a 3 and 3.5, maybe a low 4, depending. But I haven't touched it in weeks, and I have felt no pull to go back to the story. So far, the main, curiosity, the mystery is, why do the mechs that are normally killing humanity, one of them suddenly decides to join forces with August and stop a mech from destroying it? And also, August is in this very unhealthy relationship with this other dude at the end of the world. Actually, it might not be dude is gender neutral. A non-binary, I believe, character. And I was kind of wanted it for the mechs and the connection with the mechs, and I don't think I was going to get what I wanted there. And then also I like the whole integration of music and sci-fi, and we did have a scene with that, but it didn't really resonate with me. So it was just kind of this is fine. But my red flag for this one that made me DNF it is I literally didn't read a book for 2.5 days while I was reading it. And yes, there was family stuff happening, but also I was immediately able to read a book after that. So part of it's the book, part of it's life. So I got DNF'd. And now I have a couple groupings. It's mostly genre groupings because truly this was the month of science fiction. I read 5.5 science fiction if you consider one of my speculative lit fic science fictions, which is pretty awesome. Maybe that's why this month was so fun. But we're going to start with my oddball that truly doesn't have another partner with it. That's 7 Days of June, because this is just a contemporary romance. It's a very heavy romance, but if your definitions of romance is that romance is the plot and it has a happily ever after, this is a romance. But it's heavy. It has flashbacks and modern day. It's a second chance romance of these people who knew each other for a week, and it was a very important week for them. And then they haven't seen each other again because of things that happened that I'm being vague about because you learn about them in the story. And now they are adults. They are both successful authors who can't help but write about each other, and they get to reconnect. And what does that look like? So how do you recover from trauma in your childhood to now, especially trauma that is interlinked with this other individual? I really liked it. It was what I wanted to consume at the time. I consumed it in 2 days, just like I do typically with contemporary romance. I will say the first 50 pages of this, you don't meet the hero. So pacing-wise, the beginning was a bit weird. But after that, it did feel like a heavy-hitting contemporary romance for me. I will also say something you might not be used to compared to others is you have the point of views, it's dual POV, but it also sometimes has the POV of her daughter, or sometimes a random friend. And I think sometimes it's those kind of convention-breaking things that can be part of the conversation of, is this a romance? And I'm not here to be the genre police. I'm just telling you that if your only 2 definitions for something being a romance are happily ever after, and romance is the central point of the plot, there you go. But in terms, it's just a very good love story, I feel. I really appreciated it and enjoyed it. I'm glad that my friends finally got me to read it. It's just funny because we all knew it wouldn't be for one of my friends, and it wasn't. But it is what it is. All right, so now let's get into stuff I haven't really talked about as much because I read them at the end of the month. So speculative lit fic. And what I mean by this is that if you love when authors play with words and they're doing it in a speculative space, you'll probably have fun here. Both of these were really difficult for me, but that was fine. I didn't dislike that part of the experience, but I guess know that both of these were challenging. We'll start with the one that I read most recently, and that is Sift. Sift is a book where I didn't dislike the reading experience, but I kept being reminded of other books that had similar themes and did similar things, but I liked those better. And also, this did a thing that can happen to me frequently in literary fiction, where an author is writing and it feels grounded. Like, I have a sense of the rules of where I'm at, because, like, speculative spaces for me, the ones I like, they don't have to have strict rules, but, like, I kind of know what is in the realm of possibilities and what is not in the realm of possibilities. That's more what I say. And in literary fiction, I mean, we're not even talking magical realism. Like, I'm just saying, like, straight up Carmen variety literary fiction. Sometimes authors write sentences and I'm just like, wait, what? Did that happen? Is that real or is that a metaphor? This unreliable narrator is not working for me. Like, and I was getting that with Sift. So if you can have that disconnect when you read, just be forewarned. But this was really short. Here, I'll actually show real quick outside the camera. So it's a really short novella, and it has this fragmented style with a lot of white space. So that reminded me of Carmen Maria Machado's memoir, which I adore. And kind of the whole, like, what is happening, what is real, reminded me of Memory Police, especially in the adaptation of people as the world changes. It had a lot of elements of stories I like. The climate science fiction of how does one survive was like Arboreality. But all three of those books are like 5 stars for me. And this one's like a 3.5 because it never quite hit. I didn't dislike my experience. I read it in a night. But like, I was even messaging my friends to be like, what is it called when literary fiction does this? Because it's not just this book that does it. Like, I just think I need to be grounded in what are the rules of possibility here. And maybe it's because, like, the Memory Police, which is kind of grounded dystopian, but, like, also, like, it's a little weird how its conceit works. It commits to it so strong early on that I already know, okay, the rules are sometimes things vanish, and they can vanish in certain ways, and I'm not supposed to unpack it a lot because it's just a metaphor, and I was able to flow with it. Here, it was just too inconsistent. I would get too comfortable, and then I'd be whapped out of the story with a line like, wait, she just ate stones? Why did she eat stones? Like, I'd just be really confused. So my brain was confused in an uncomfortable way. The one that I read that I wasn't confused with, and that's how I could tell that, like, it can work for me when things are absurd, and that's The Saint of Bright Doors, which was still a lot of work. This is still a lot of work for me, but I finally did it. I finally read the most nominated book of the year. I feel like it is. It's either this or Witch King. And regardless, I finally read both, and I liked this more than Witch King. So there's that. I mean, neither of them are favorite books by any stretch of the imagination. This one, though, it is never trying to explain its reality, but I was very clearly told early on what is possible, which is pretty much anything. Like, it's just a fantastical reimagining of a Sri Lanka type area. And, like, right away, our main character has their mother get rid of their shadow. So you just know out of the gate, okay, weird stuff's just allowed to happen. He can see demons. There's this city with these magical doors. Like, you don't know the rules, and everything kind of is a metaphor. And it actually is, I believe, a retelling of a story of Buddha, I believe. I was reading one of the Goodreads reviews to get some more insight into the cultural stuff I missed. And I really did like a lot of the moments. Like, this one does feel like literary fiction in that, like, the connective tissue is just the observation of the human experience of Fetter. Fetter grows up as a kid who is told this is your purpose, and then he chooses to not have a purpose, and then by the end you have him choosing a purpose. So that's his trajectory in a very simple nutshell, but in the meantime, this world is so confusing, especially to Fetter himself. He can't grasp the politics and the caste, and he doesn't know what's happening, and he's just trying to live and live a life he is proud of. And so because of that, going from scene to scene, it's just kind of a little chaotic jumps. And sometimes there are some segments I'm like, oh, I really liked that and what it represented. And other times I'd be like, I'm bored. And that happened a fair bit. The pacing was rough for me. It was just a really rough pacing. Like, it wasn't, I think, for me, the cultural disconnects or the writing style or the magical influences. It was truly just, I had an issue with keeping myself engaged in the story because of pacing. That said, I did really like some of the stuff at the end. I'm glad I read it. And, like, I understand why it's on awards lists. So there's at least that. I have an understanding for it. I just wish I was one of the people who, like, my brain and the writing style meshed like butter. Because if I did, it would have been, like, one of the best reading experiences ever. Because it is pushing so many fun boundaries, subverting so many fun things in fantasy. Although I don't think we can say a non-chosen chosen one is subversive anymore. I feel like every other book either has a chosen one or has a non-chosen chosen. I don't know. Maybe I've just read too many that do that. Looking at you, Chorus of Dragons. But, still, I think it does play with a lot of fun fantasy things while trying to tackle real world issues like transmission of disease, like discrimination against people in other castes, like how do we handle asylum and refugees, and just the nonsensical nature of bureaucracy and how we can just exist in that fever state of like, why are we going through the steps we're going through? I really liked a lot of that discussion. So yeah, those are the two that I read near the end of the month that I hadn't really talked about. And then we'll just do fantasy because we'll end with my big category of science fiction. So, first, before I talk about this book, I was kindly given a finished copy by Tor, which doesn't in no way sway my review, but if you haven't seen it, it's really pretty. It has a couple different textures on the cover. It has like two. It has like the more glossy background and then a more matte dragon. I really like that. And if you are a fan of the color mustard, we got that going on here. So I'm really happy to have it because I did enjoy this enough to want a finished copy. I did not love this as much as Chorus of Dragons, but like Chorus of Dragons is 5 books with convoluted worlds and like you get to sit with these characters for so long. Like I always knew it's like there's no way I'm going to love this book as much as I did Chorus of Dragons because it's like a 400-page standalone and it's a heist already. Like, am I a heist girl? No, not really. But that said, I had a lot of fun. Like, it was a fun fantasy story for me. I had quick buy-in to all the characters. The world building was still that just like lush, like different place. Like I felt like I was in the jungle and we're in the depths, and I loved being on the sky ship. And it had a lot of things that reminded me of like when I really love watching something like Stardust. You know, I'm in a lot of different locations. I feel grounded in them. And I liked meeting our cast of characters and seeing how they related to each other and how the bonds were formed. I love Jens Lyon's commitment to a throuple. Always more people should commit to a throuple. And the dragons were fun. So I know a lot of people are like, why are we comparing this to Fourth Wing? It's because the dragons are mean. Like that's what I feel like everyone forgets how mean the dragons are in Fourth Wing, but the dragons in Fourth Wing are not nice. And when you form a bond with dragons in both Fourth Wing and here, you are at the behest of the dragon. Now, that's the only similarity is that we have dragons that bond with riders, and that bond is not, like, that's not even. It's not an even bond, and the dragons are kind of assholes, okay? That's the similarity. It is not a big romance book, so yeah, if you were looking for a romantasy, I don't know who was calling it a romantasy, that's not what this is. It is a heist fantasy book with some very fun, larger-than-life characters. It was great. I had a fun time with it. Like I said, it was just fun. I don't know if I'll reread it. I like owning it. Yeah, I'm not even a dragon person, and I just thought the dragon elements were enjoyable here. Learning about the past and how, like, history wasn't written correctly. You know, classic tropes like that. It's so super fun. And then the other fantasy I read, I mean, you just saw my TBR where I said I might not read this book, and then, like, I needed an audiobook, and I finished it in a day and a half. So I've read Dawn Shard. I forgot how good Dawn Shard is because of how mediocre Edge Dancer is, which I feel bad for saying that, but Edge Dancer truly is just such an okay book. And Dawn Shard is so good. I mean, I always loved this character from the interludes that she's in. I'm just going to be vague about her. And in one of the interludes, something happens to her, and she needs to start to overcome that. And you see that at the end of Oathbringer. And in this book, you see her with her new destiny and how she's dealing with getting agency and independence, which is awesome. And she gets to interact with Lopin, and I think they're fun foils to each other. And this island was also in a separate interlude, and this island is so cool and full of Cosmere lore. I just had fun. I just had so much fun. Even knowing what it was going to do, even knowing the questions I would not have answered. I loved seeing Rock's daughter. Amazing. I really like it. It's a really good time. So this is actually, like, just very fun. I don't think you have to read it before Rhythm of War because, like, it's really not connected to anything lore-wise in Rhythm of War. But I think it's fun to read. So by that standard, I recommend it. So those are my fantasy. All right. Hey, only at 14 some minutes. I'm doing okay. Sci-fi. We got 5 sci-fi. I don't really think there's a way to group this. We'll start with, I guess, my least favorite and work my way up, but I actually really liked a lot of these. I think they're all at least, like, 4 stars. Let's start with, you know, the surprise. We Have Always Been Here. Been on my shelf for, like, 3.5 years. So many people I know gave it average ratings, if not lower. I consumed this within 3 days, easy. I read the first 130 pages in one day. It was at a time where my brain was in a horrible headspace. Like, I cannot even describe to you how depressed I was when I picked this up. And it's not like it fixes depression or anxiety, but the character herself she's a little bit neurotic and anxious, and like I felt comfort and catharsis in that. Like, you get flashbacks to her upbringing, and then you get her on this ship, and it's kind of a closed circle mystery thriller sci-fi where things are happening, and she's not allowed to know why because of her, like, employee status. And you're kind of like, what's happening? We know things are wrong. We know information's not being shared. And, you know, it does a lot of things I like in science fiction, and I'm not going to say it does any of it perfectly, but for a debut, I thought it all intersected in kind of a fun, interesting way. Definitely has those discussions of what does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to have consciousness? It does some odd stuff with quantum dimensions, but it commits full-heartedly, and I have to respect it for that. Like, did it make sense? No, but again, kind of hearkening back to Sift, it's like, it was always within the realm of possibilities, so I had going with itness, and I went with it. And, you know, I had a good time. She was a prickly character, and I guess from that one, we'll go to my next prickly character. And, like, I guess she's not super prickly. She's more prickly in the first book. But this is Captain Eva Innocente in Prime Deception's second book in the Chilling Effect trilogy. This was super fun. Just another fun time. Kind of like The Sky on Fire by Jen Lyons. Nothing to write home about other than I like this crew of people, and they have a quest to go on, and they go do the thing. And the highlight of this book is one of the psychic cats, Mala. She gets to actually go on the adventure. And she's amazing, and all I could do was picture my cat Donna at every single turn. That's all I could do. It was fan-frickin-tastic. Love it so much. But yeah, I mean, if you want adventure science fiction with like a pretty well-built cast, like, this is really fun. I had a good time with it. I'm curious where the third book will go. I definitely want to read it before the end of the year. But that was part of my whole like, oh wow, I haven't read like any of the books on my physical TBR and I said these books would explode. So I've now talked about all three of them. August, We Have Always Been Here, and Prime Deceptions. Those are the three. And now, let's go into another prickly character. So many prickly characters. Some Desperate Glory. You know, I really have to thank the Ursula K. Le Guin list for putting it on there, because, like, I was avoiding it for some unknown reason. It's on the Hugo short list. I think it was on the Locust list. Like, people I know have liked it. What was stopping me from reading this book? And I do think it's the cover, which is, you know, put it on the list of a million books that I really like that I almost didn't read because of the cover. And that list should really convince me that I need to stop looking at covers. But here we have Valkyr. And it's a classic military science fiction situation. She is in a fascist military regime. She is gung-ho all the way in, but then that regime kind of betrays her, and it sets her on this path of basically deconstruction. If you are looking for a deconstruction story, this is pretty fantastic. I have one of my friends who is actually deconstructed from a kind of abusive religious state with her family and community, found it actually a very fun, cathartic time. So I think it's one of those speculative works that can really help you engage with a heavy topic that is really difficult to deal with, but in a far enough removed space where you can see the empowerment of Valkyr as she's learning things, as she chooses her own path. And it does some cool stuff that I really can't say without spoiling things. But it's kind of reminded me, I guess, of untraditionally paced media, where you think the ending should happen, but then you realize I am only halfway through the movie. And that happens in this book, but it happens in a very fun way. And I think it really helps with the themes. Like, it wasn't just fun. It really adds layers to the themes, because you're not just following Valkyr, you're following multiple characters and how they deal with learning about the true state of their world. This also has wonky science fiction that does not follow hard rules, and you must go with it. I went with it because I understood the realm of possibilities, and it was very fun. And the ending made me chuckle. So yeah, this was a delight. This was absolutely a surprise for me. If you were also being put off by it, it is a stupid, solid standalone science fiction book. Like, and especially people who maybe liked Cameron Hurley's Light Brigade, I think this is different from that, but like, I could see overlap in the groups of people who liked them. Like, definitely different character voice. I feel almost like the character in Cameron Hurley's Light Brigade, it's a bit more removed, and it's more about the horrors of war, where this is very different focus. This is about like the supremacy of a species, and also how do you choose the right path is a big theme in it as well. All right, and I have two more that I read at the beginning of the month. So where has time gone by? We have Brothers in Arms. This is a Bejeweled. So the opposite of a prickly character, we have the all-charismatic Miles Verkosigan. And this one, Miles is so charismatic that he makes up a cover story that accidentally becomes true. And it's just funny. It's just fun to see. He stumbles per usual in his interpersonal relationships, but in a way that, like, is charming, and he's always respectful when, like, his advances are not taken well. So, like, that works out. And you can actually, I think, see the vulnerability of Miles. I think in this part of the Verkosigan saga, I mean, you always know as a reader that Miles has had to overcome a lot in the Barriar Society because of his disabilities. So you know that. But he always is so charismatic and cheerful and just, like, runs headfirst into everything like he has no care in the world. And you start to feel his cares in the world in the last novellas and this book, I feel. Especially with some of the stuff that has gotten revealed, and, like, he kind of uses more of his Baden side to make decisions here. And you really feel the duality of Miles in this one. So I'm excited to get to the next one after we've started to really, like, crack that open a bit. And then the last one's The Will to Battle, the third book in the Terra Ignota series. And what can I say? I mean, truly, what can I say about the third book? It's The Will to Battle. So the whole Terra Ignota series is about this far off, imagining utopia of our Earth. And we're at this pivotal point where that utopia will have to change or won't last, something like that. And the first two books are about what is the trigger for this change. And the third book is about the transition state. Like, how do we go from where we were, and then are we going to war? And if so, what are the dominoes that lead us to war? Because if you've ever studied world history, you kind of know that it's rarely actually one defining moment that begins a conflict. And that's what The Will to Battle is about. And also, things happen, and you read the ending, and once again, you're like, ah! Every time in these books. So yeah, that's what I can say, spoiler free. I'm enjoying it. I'm excited for the last book, which is, like, twice as long. It's called Perhaps the Stars, which that's been a phrase this whole where perhaps the stars, the idea of, like, we should strive for the stars, because we are still very earthbound. Like, we have, I think, some colonies on Moon, and maybe we're working towards Mars, but on a whole, it's a very earth-centered, futuristic society with a lot of cool tech, but it's still very earthbound. And it definitely pulls from different philosophers that I am not experienced with. So, do you need to be experienced with those philosophers to have fun? I say no, but you probably have more fun if you like to geek out about philosopher teachings from Europe during, like, I believe the Renaissance and Enlightenment era specifically. But it's been a long time since I've learned AP Euro. I could never teach AP Euro. So yeah, that's what I read. It was very fun. I'm excited for my next slate of books. I feel like I've got some good momentum, hoping to keep it going. I'm really glad this is the year of sci-fi and I've truly committed to it. Let me know what you've read. If you don't want to say anything specific about any of the books I've mentioned, for an emoji, I say leave a dragon, because I really do like this cover. Like, I just think it's so fun. I like the texture experience. I'm happy to have it on my shelf. Oh, this isn't, like, it's like barely a 400-page book, guys. So if you're ever complaining about wanting a standalone fantasy that's just a fun, good old time, I think this delivers, personally. Anyways, otherwise, like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.